Hi Lavanya, would you like to test the screen share एक बार?
Yes, ma'am. Sure. I'm not getting a share option, ma'am. I think I have to be assigned. Now I'm the presenter. Okay, sure, ma'am.
So just check if it's working because yesterday we had some issues, no?
Yes, ma'am. Just doing this. Is the screen sort of visible?
Yes, yes, yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah.
Soumya ma'am, shall we start with the recap of yesterday?
Yes, I think Mukunda is here. So Mukunda and ma'am, can we start? Ma'am, hello. Hello. Can you hear me, Shivani?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Right. Mukund, can we start?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah, Shivani, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shivani K.
Just
I would request.
Just one sec, Shivani. I want to know if we have people join.
What, ma'am?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether our students had all joined. There are 24 participants as of now, and whether we want to wait maybe about 2-3 minutes to make sure that everybody is because I'm seeing that they are joining as we speak. So 2-3 minutes. Yeah, Soumya, is that okay?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Yeah. I'm just messaging the CR also.
Yeah. Also, probably we can use the opportunity to take a screenshot of all the speakers.
Sarah, Nikhil, Nitin sir, if you, Lavanya, Shobit, if you can switch on your cameras, please. We'd like to take a screenshot. Lavanya, Nitin sir, Nikhil.
My system is sort of very slow. It's turning on. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Shobit, Raju ji, can switch on your camera.
Just give me a second.
बाल बना के आना.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, Soumya.
We can
a second.
ask
Just
Jacqueline also to. Yeah. We are taking a photo, everybody. Saran, you need to be back, Saran. Saran and Nikhil. Jacqueline ma'am was not there, so now she's here.
So I'm just taking it. 1, 2, 3. Smile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya.
Shall we start now? I think more people have joined, so I think we are good to start.
Sure, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shivani Kam. I would request my friend Nikhil to recap the very interesting session we had yesterday. Over to you, Nikhil.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third day of International Roundtable Conference. Yesterday, we started with the keynote address of Dr. V. Buzz, Additional Secretary, National Disaster Management Authority, India, who talks about growing concerns on the global trends of disaster in a transboundary view, how risk information is needed for normal governance to work, and that policy framework must rethink the national approach to disaster reduction and go beyond just usage of water to disaster risk reduction in a transboundary water course by not just talking about intentions but also looking at its successful implementation. The paper presentation started by a knowledge enriching presentation on ICJ on transboundary harm policies on South Asian transboundary water governance by Ms. Soumya Kumar from JTSDS, who introduced the important trends on transboundary harm in global space and provided a framework for its application for risk governance in South Asia. She further talked about how the ICJ has done well in bringing the concept of transboundary harm to the forefront of bilateral policy making. She also proposes some spaces for the South Asian countries where they could work together to prevent transboundary harm. The next presentation by Mr. Eklavya Anand from Make Pine Abhiyan on identifying and managing water-related risk along with Indo-Nepal border, with focus on the border areas in Bihar in India. Yes, in smaller river system, he put forth some data to show that it is the numerous small transboundary seasonal rivers which brings the flash flood in the region, whereas the focus of government and policymakers is still on larger rivers. He put emphasis on making flood and river specific policies and plans and not the common plan for all rivers and all type of floods. In the next paper, inclusive collaborative water governance, managing risk by drawing on Australian experiences, including failures by Ms. Grant on Sustainable Future from Sustainable Future University of Technology, Sydney. She talked about collaborative transboundary water governance as the basis for risk-informed approaches, the reason why the planning of Murray-Darling Basin was a failure, the need for an inclusive collaborative governance as a mode of engagement. The second session started by welcome address of chairperson Mr. Surya Prakash, the professor NIDM, where he highlighted the issue of interlinkages between politics and governance. The address was followed by paper presentation by Ms. Veena from CUTS. She talked about creating inclusive spaces for cross-border trade for riverine communities in the transboundary waterways of Brahmaputra. She tried to explore the commercial angle of water in transboundary context and issues thereof. The next presentation of Soham and Suranjana explored the Farakka riverbank erosion and a barrage of transboundary issues, where they highlighted critical issues like siltation and riverbank erosion, salinization and groundwater depletion, and relates these whole issues with a larger problem like food security. The next presentation of Bateshwar and Meghna on Sundarban transboundary conflict on water governance, development and socio-cultural impact on inhabitants demonstrated that various impact on lives of local people of Sundarban due to transboundary conflict through a video by Al Jazeera. The last speaker of the day, Ms. Shilpa, talked about the issues arising out of construction of large dams by taking example from Tipaimukh project from Manipur. She also explained the issue of relocation and resettlement of the affected people and concluded with reiterating the fact of reframing the concept of development. These two sessions yesterday gave us a background on the wide range of issues like development projects, dams, political tussle, which are connected to issues of transboundary water governance and requires immediate and urgent attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil, for the update. Today's presentation will carry forward the discussion on transboundary governance of water and disasters with the theme Water Governance, Security and Protection. For this session, we have the privilege to have three distinguished speakers as chair, Mr. Mukunda Upadhyay, and the speaker for the plenary session, Dr. Janki Andharia and Ms. Lavanya Arvind. I would like to welcome Mr. Mukunda Upadhyay as the chair for the event. Mukund Upadhyay is working as a program officer, disaster risk reduction at Oxfam India, Lucknow office, and leading the project Transboundary Rivers of South Asia in the Mahakali River Basin in the Indo-Nepal border areas. The project is funded by the government of Sweden. He has written many papers on cooperation on transboundary governance. Mukunda has focused his career in disaster management with experience in disaster risk reduction, humanitarian response, and WASH. With Oxfam, he has worked on designing and monitoring DRR programs in Uttar Pradesh. Over to you, Mr. Mukunda, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to chair the session. And I welcome you all to the third day of this international roundtable. And in the last 2 days, we have learned a lot. We have listened to prominent and distinguished speakers from different agencies, from different institutes. Today, our focus would be on transboundary governance of water and disasters, particularly focusing on international policies, law, and practice. And we have here with us some excellent papers, excellent presentations, which will help us understand, the uncertainties that are associated with transboundary peripheral spaces. So when we're speaking about international policies, international practices, we cannot ignore the aspect of capitalism that plays a very significant role. And we have with us Dr. Janki Andharia and Ms. Lavanya S. Arvind, who will be focusing on these issues, particularly on the aspects of disaster capitalism, SOC doctrine. If you have heard the concept that was being initiated in the early 2000s, so in the late 2000s. So not taking much time, I would like to invite Dr. Janki Andharia and Ms. Lavanya S. Arvind to kindly present their insights on transboundary governance of water and disasters, international policies, law and practices, and enlighten us all. We'll have a open-ended session at the end of the paper presentation, and we'll have discussions on the papers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. For the plenary session, we are also joined by Dr. Janki Andharia and Dean of JTSTS, Ms. Lavanya Arvind, faculty at JTSTS. Dr. Andharia has over 32 years of experience in the field of community organization and social development. Her area of work focuses on gender issues, environmental concerns, democratic governance, addressing diverse forms of marginalization and vulnerability. At the World Education Congress Global Award for Excellence in Education.
Shivani, it's okay. Don't introduce me. It's all right. You can introduce Lavanya. Yeah, please do mention Lavanya's background. Yeah.
It's okay.
Thank you. She has been involved in national and state level policy making work
No, I have already been introduced. That's the reason I was saying no need to
Sure,
introduce.
ma'am. She is also joined by Ms. Lavanya S. Irwin, who teaches at the Center for Disaster and Development at JTSDS. Her research interests are in the area of gender and development, gender in disaster settings, sustainability, vulnerabilities in the context of disaster risk reduction, social exclusion and social protection, and gender and climate change. She has master's degree in women's studies, business administration, and fine arts, and she has done her amphil in women's studies, and she is also an author with several Indian and international published books, and she is also the winner of the Commonwealth Short Story Special Prize in 2011. I request Professor Janki and Lavanya ma'am to present on transboundary governance of water in disaster context, political economy, debates and contestations. Over to you, Janki ma'am and Lavanya ma'am.
Thank you,
Okay.
Shiva.
Thank you. Thank you, Shivani. I'll request Lavanya to share screen and sort of get started by way of a quick sort of backdrop. Wanted to share that we have worked on a fairly detailed paper which looks at several aspects of the context, and we adopt a political economy perspective and frame our presentation within sort of debates and contestations that are going on in the whole idea of transboundary rivers and water governance. So in this presentation, we are taking a little bit of a snapshot. We're not going to talk about everything that the paper talks about, but we thought we'll highlight a couple of issues which are appropriate for this particular thematic session. And we basically, the first part of, we're making 6 sort of key points. One is the first part actually captures or raises what are those issues and contestations from a political economy perspective. How do we understand people who live around rivers and their sort of economy? How do their lives interface with the ecosystems? And then when we juxtapose that with the context of the neoliberal frame, we problematize the existing approaches to the way we look at people and their lives and livelihoods. Yeah? And therefore, their experiences, what do they throw up? I think some of these things we are framing it within the broader political economy perspective. We also argue for the inadequacy of the international relations perspectives. While those are necessary, they are inadequate. Yeah, because they are slow, they are tardy, and we'll sort of dwell on that. So we are not saying that they are redundant, but certainly the IR perspective is not something that really is going to yield results the way we expect them to. We also argue for the centrality of an intersectional approach where we emphasize issues of multiple vulnerabilities which are layered for many people who might be disabled, who might be ethnic minorities. Look at dimensions of gender discrimination that people experience. So the idea of transboundary river governance requires a multi-pronged understanding, which is again located in the idea of social and environmental justice. So we cannot lose sight of this core fundamental principle. In fact, in our master's program, we often say this, that the master's program is located within social and environmental justice frame, because you can do disaster management without having a strong value base. And that is where we start talking about technocratic approaches being inadequate, right? So here also we argue for value framing, which emphasizes social and environmental justice. We also sort of talk a little bit about key issues of sustainability in the transboundary context. What are those issues of sustainability which must form the core of our approach? And we summarize by talking or flagging the various debates that are emerging, which kind of brings the entire sort of discussions that we have been having since the last 2 days together in probably a single figure or a sort of flow chart. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lavanya, who would be making this presentation. Lavanya, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'll be presenting. Professor Andaria had laid the agenda for the paper, the 6 thematic areas which we are going to inquire. I'm going to be looking at each one of those in a little bit more detail. So when we're talking about a political economy approach, it's necessary to locate it from the historical perspectives and perspectives of historical continuity. The colonial legacies which privilege structural measures rather than any kind of conservatory or protective approach require interrogation. And we've had a very extractive relationship with the environment rather than a conservatory or protective measure. So there's been an unbridled pursuit of environmentally insensitive, water wasteful mining and agricultural practices that have been exploitative in nature, exploitative industrial practices that have brought us to the 6th mass extinction. For instance, the construction of dams along these rivers affects the livelihoods of population living along these rivers. So dams are claimed to be symbols of development for their multi-purpose utility and contribution to the welfare of mankind. But history has shown us that they have brought about a compulsory displacement of people caused by dams over, and it brings to the question of social justice and equity. The displaced persons not only lose their income and wealth, but also other social goods, opportunities for livelihood and upward mobility, and initiatives to rehabilitate them by the state has proved to be total failures of poor planning and a callous attitude. Which brings us to the question of neoliberalism taking newer forms and how capital seeks newer terrain to become profitable. So the neoliberal free market policies which are being followed in the disaster arena, what happens is that national crises are often exploited for profit to push questionable policies, while at a time when citizens are too distracted emotionally and physically to engage and develop an adequate response. So India's rivers and the riparian ecology have been, for instance, badly affected by the alarming rate of unrestricted sand mining and industrial pollution that impacts downstream communities that are often from a different nation. There are studies by India Rivers Forum to talk about some of these industrial activities in the name of development planning along transboundary basins. We're also clear that developments in water sciences and engineering alone have not delivered adequately to engage on this challenge. And there is a strong need to consider the social dynamic, the cultural dynamic, the heritage issues, and the historical trajectory of development in the region, which draws from colonial practices. One needs to combine local knowledge, scientific advancements in hydrology and biodiversity to address these very diverse transboundary challenges. Right now, systems are pretty event-centric, and one has to look at long-term recovery. To give you a little perspective, transboundary river basins cross international borders and serve as a primary source of fresh water for approximately 40% of the world's population. This is according to the International Groundwater Resource Assessment Center and the IHP, which is the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. It talks about how 30 to 50% of the world's population depend on groundwater sources from 608 transboundary aquifer systems. Context, we can't just look at event-centric responses in a flooding situation and so on, but you have to build in what's being referred to as adaptive social protection that recognizes the demographic profiles of riparian communities, and this adaptive protectionism mechanisms will absorb shocks and stresses of the community, and it's could be targeted and well prepared interventions at multiple sort of levels. One of the things that Professor Andaria spoke about, and I want to sort of elaborate, is the inadequacy of the international relations perspective. The international, no doubt, it's a necessary perspective, but is it sufficient and effective, and how can these instruments be strengthened are some of the debates. More than 450 transboundary water treaties have been signed since 1820. And around 60% of the river basins still lack any form of cooperative arrangements. And some of these treaties have taken years and years of diplomatic and regional cooperation and engagements in the area. For instance, the treaties around the Ganga took 30 years. The Israeli-Jordan water treaties took about 40 years. And sometimes there is conflict in the region, and water quality and quantity get degraded to a point where health of dependent populations and ecosystems are damaged. Only around 1/3 of multilateral basins have treaties signed by at least 3 states. And only 11 basins have treaties that include all riparians. This is from the various sources I have put in here. Although this is slightly dated in terms of 2002, there are still UNEP states there hasn't been any substantial progress. The situation is even worse for transboundary aquifers, where very few agreements exist. In fact, UNEP talks about how there are only 6 aquifer agreements that have been adopted at the international level. And therefore, it's a long and lengthy process to go to look at the aquifer agreements, right? So the international relations in that case, we need a broader framework to look at international relationships in the transboundary river basins. Policies have, as argued, been inadequate because there are other factors as well, geopolitical tensions in the region. So analysis of certain previous treaties form testament to the fact that there exists significant time lag between when nations first start to impinge on each other's water planning and when agreements are finally and arduously reached. This time lag often heightens tensions and pressures and creates regional instability and require years to sort of reach some sort of agreement. Now, there's a question of water sharing and pacifism, I beg your pardon. Equitable water sharing arrangements may also serve as a catalyst for peace and robust water diplomacy. So institutionalizing people-to-people ties amongst this diverse and heterogeneous group can enable harmony in water regions. So instead of conflict, we can talk about perhaps we can talk about how water sharing can be a catalyst for peace. But currently we have the experience of a weak, tardy international relationship perspectives, because bilateral modes of collaboration are the ones that India seems to prefer. And there are questions on the questions on collaboration in terms of at what level, between whom, how micro, and for what purpose requires more work currently. Water resource development in South Asia, several studies have revealed it's not entirely sustainable, and there is an urge for South Asia to move towards cooperative and participatory approaches along river basins for water sharing. Be specific to the Ganges Basin, one of the most populous and ecologically vulnerable regions of Southeast Asia. There is a call for government, non-government agencies, the private sector, civil society groups to come together and to be actively engaged in these efforts. So there is a heterogeneity of actors and interests, and we must confront the heterogeneity of the various actors in and it has to go beyond just diplomacy, but actually people-to-people ties being institutionalized. So the transboundary water governance has, as argued, has to go beyond water diplomacy, and it has to include other non-state actors, even large corporations who have different interests, and large corporations are often legal entities in their own right. Policy makings need to be more inclusive of other voices. When we spoke of intersectionality, we meant the burdens of identity and different socio-political identities, and an inclusion of these other voices in the formation of policies which engages civil society rather than the top-down exclusionary approach. Certain theoretical interrogations towards social and environmental justice, which is one of the key thrust areas of our paper and also in the roundtable. The idea that livelihoods of the poor, security, is reliant on system services is sometimes absent from these policies, and existing power hierarchies on the basis of caste, class, ethnicity, religion, race, indigeneity, oppress specific groups of people and affect access and bring about alienation. So water as a traditional medium of exclusion requires contextualization and intervention. So when we talk about gender justice, for instance, the question of access, opportunity, equity, and participatory processes, and including different genders in decision-making process, because it's recognizing the role of different genders in water management. For instance, women and girls are disproportionate burdens of water procurement and household water management, and there is a question of mobility and safety. Right, so that aspect has to be brought in. And again, climate and environmental justice, the communities least likely to contribute to climate change are most impacted by it. So recognition of the different actors and an intergenerational and an intersectional equity in terms of economic, psychological, and sociological context, to look at the concept or the idea of fairness or justice between generations and adequate resource availability for upward mobility. We must also look at, while we talk about these canonical concepts such as DRR and sustainability, we must look at where the knowledge production is happening, who is producing this knowledge, and about whom, and whose knowledge is regarded as legitimate and valid, and whose knowledge is dismissed. So rejection of hegemonic knowledge that claims universality is required, while recognizing certain local knowledge as valid. Some of the key issues of sustainability in the transboundary context is agricultural water use is not sustainable in many transboundary basins around the world for reasons that include salinization, groundwater overdraft, misallocation, and so on. Must take into the account consequences of water mismanagement that will impede sustainability. There's a cross-cutting area in formulating SDGs. People, planet, prosperity, peace, partnerships. Water and groundwater exploitation, there's a recognition that it can lead to conflict and stress on already water scarce countries. Industry and land use can also lead to water and groundwater pollution, overexploitation and pollution occur in a transboundary context, and this can lead to significant harm for the country. Similarly, the construction of large-scale dams, pollution in the downstream, and so on. So I've been told my time is running out. I'll wrap up quickly. So these were some of the theoretical perspectives, and the argument that a multi-perspective approach on transboundary water governance is required. So a political economy approach to transboundary cooperation in the context of new terrains for capital incursion, developmental interventions, wage labor, foreign trade, livelihoods, free markets, policies, institutionalizing people-to-people ties, an intersectional, overlapping, and an interconnected and or interdependent issues ranging from governance and rights-based pathways to justice, to protectionism, conservation, and regional cooperation. Recognizing the institutional interlinkages and the structures that connect people to authorities, the power differentials between these different institutions and nations must be viewed from the people's lived experience, which are rooted in rights. So on the right, the diagram is basically the different issues that confront water governance. So in this context, we are these are some of the debates that are emerging that is in front of you. What is the role of technology? How do we confront heterogeneity of issues and actors? And how can one implement hydrogeological science-based protocol that takes into account gender, social justice, environmental justice, and governance issues built into it? So the working together of these different disciplines and systematic transdisciplinary investigations is required, and this is our sort of bringing together the different debates on the transboundary water governance. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. For the next presentation, I would like to invite Ms. Abhiksha Das, who is a livelihood expert in Haritika organization executing water-related projects. I may request her to present her paper on riparian communities on peace over conflict in relation to transboundary water governance. Over to you, Ms. Abhiksha, ma'am. Can we have the presentation of Ms. Abhiksha Das?
Diksha, would you like to say hello to everybody? Can you show your video as well, please?
Abhisheka, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Your voice
Yeah.
is very soft. If you can increase, come closer to the mic, maybe.
I will not be able to go on because of the network issue.
Okay.
Presenting
Yes,
likewise.
it was just to say hello, and then maybe you can stop your video. So we understand.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I will start my presentation. So basically, not go deep with the paper which I have already written. I will touch on the main focuses which I wanted to put forward and highlight in the presentation. First of all, to introduce, I would like to introduce main major river basins which are in the South Asia. And
Bifika, I think you need to either increase your volume or, as Soumya mentioned, come closer to the mic, please. You're very soft.
just give me a
Say something,
hello.
then we will know. Yeah, okay. The admin is also, the technical team is increasing.
Yes, yes.
volume.
Ma'am,
Now
just
it's
one
better.
suggestion. What you can do is you can speak little louder. That will also solve the problem.
Yes, I think we can hear her better now. Yeah, Abhisheka, you can go on. Thank you.
Sure. So for 5 million millennium, water rules and relationships have evolved in the midst of clashes of local needs, customs, and social, cultural, and religious beliefs. Strictly speaking, also, the development of corporations among the South Asian countries like Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan, with respect to Indus and the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna river basin, South Asia's major transboundary rivers have been a cause of tensions, apprehensions, and going on disputes. As in the political charges issues, the tensions and mounting over the control of water supplies emanating from scarcity, fate, and also bad governance. And the riparian communities of all the people suffers and the environment suffers too. So for giving an example, the Indus rivers and its tributaries collectively make up one of the largest irrigations and canals in the world. Of sediments too. And we all know about the dispute, how it started from the partitions of India and the creations of Pakistan that only ignored the most existing irrigation infrastructure on the Indus Basin. So we remember the interdominant agreement of 1948, assertions of control of water in East and West Pakistan. I read an article by Ghosh where he depicted and painted tragedy so well that in one of his paper he said one part of the Pakistan it was fully deserted because of the no water communications done to that side of the part, and on the other side the Punjab where it was lusciously green. Moving forward, we should always go beyond geo-hydropolitical issues because we have conflicts over mainly around sharing and livelihood, culture, and health is the only conscious decisions which goes around and ignored hegemonically. So when we talk about the cooperation thing, the international treaties and all those kind of temporary uh, notes and devastated treaties have been in our consciousness that we always remove this kind of hegemonic rule of power comes from the distance. Put in some words, like what are the problems in transboundary governance? Say the fear of hegemonic rules of a country because of its size, then there is no well-defined and feasible conflict resolution. There is a panic and terror of third-party involvement in the mechanism like the World Bank. Then the advantages of influence abilities of a country over conflict and putting together the forceful treaties of another reasons and failed peace because one country doesn't agree on that. The interest of a third party, which I already mentioned, and the political advantages and managing equitable advantages of countries involved. Absence of multilateral treaties over bilateral treaties. Wanted to put together the livelihood lenses and how security is a problem. Exertions on the irrigations and the power benefits of large dams have been seen from historical context, and it has immense power and hegemonic rule over one country over the other. So from this, the neglected the riparian communities who altogether face the of the problems in socially, environmentally, economical cost, and also the conflicts. Displacement happens of the riparian communities, their cultures, their traditions, their traditional knowledge, and so on. We also forget sometimes ki when we have this kind of social and environmental disputes, we also have to take into consideration the animal conflict that they are also in this plate, and loss of habitation can cause ecological devastations too. Example in the northeast, there is a concept of alternative livelihoods, and they also have different kind of livelihood to sustain their life. And once this displacement happens with the Brahmaputra flood, flash floods, and all those things, this kind of good knowledge and livelihoods also gets lost in this journey. So with that also, this kind of traditional knowledge systems get disrupted too. So the aspect of risk impacts and how we can manage this natural resources altogether. Why the power and the equity plays the enforcement of treaties and advantages of geographical locations and size. These are all the things which I touched in the paper and will be moving because of the time constraints too. And coming to this, the so what we can do to configure all those things, all those problems all together. First, these are the 7 things which I put together. Like first, we should always go for the broadening of the scope of cooperation agreements. We should look beyond just the infrastructural way of life, but also the social things. Second, the adaptive, we can have an adaptive availability of management where all those silos can be together and be a holistic developmental agreement in between the countries or the regions. The picture. Time policies when conditions change, because every time some kind of dams or constructions is happening, we forget that these conditions can change a different part of the country or different part of the region, but accordingly the policies never change. So if there can be a reason for us or any an institutionalized party to apply these policies according to the conditions change, then this will be really helpful for keeping up the peace and the conflict way. Fourth, regularizing the communications and data exchange, because we all have spoken in our different presentations and the 3 days that we should always give more importance to uh, traditional knowledge systems accordingly, and we know the advancement of science, how it can be a push to a push towards the traditional knowledge system. So regularizing these communications between the countries can become a good agreement between them to flourish the development process also. The effectiveness of the mechanisms incorporated can be an agreement being inclusive of the social, the ecological, and the infrastructural way of things. Last but not the least, the scrutiny and the checkpoints, because uh, one shouldn't be taking advantage of the size and the dimensions of a country, but also uh, gather the enforcement of constructions over the one. If there is no checkpoints, then this can be a disadvantage on the power of the other countries. To talk about the innovations in my paper, uh, where I have given this 8 solutions in the innovations part of the thing. Like uh, we always forget to, um, map all the resources all together. Only focus on the things uh, which uh, 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 which is big in size and we which is talking about like dams and everything. But altogether there are different kind of resources which should be anyway taken into considerations, uh, planning it out or making a treaty between two countries. Then identifying the caveats and the gaps between them. And then there is another concept which works simultaneously is the decentralization and localization. Communities evolved, making the traditional knowledge evolve. There should be a coalition of governance and a new concept which came to the bureaucratic way of governance, because it can have a quick decision making tool in it. Then the data sharing, because We all have silos in our countries and in our regions, and everyone has an expert in time of conflict and keeping the peace up. But sharing it will us a good resilient power for all the countries, because disaster can't be theoretically handled on within the country, but it is out of reach. Then seventh is the creation of repository of resilience tactics, traditional knowledge system, exchange for countries to fall back on at the times of conflict. So making a database is a very, very important all together forward to. Shared economic corridors, because this will be give us a diplomacy between the countries where we can have enforcement and flourishment of economical goals together, and this can bring change. These are the things which I try to highlight in my paper.
Ma'am, you're not audible.
Vishika, I think are you done with your presentation?
Yeah, I am done with.
We can't hear you. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
She will need to stop screen share. Can she stop screen share, please? So that the next speaker can come in.
Now I invite Mr. Nitin Sathe, Air Commodore. Nitin Sathe is a helicopter pilot of the Indian Air Force with 36 years of commissioned service to his credit. Mr. Sathe is presently posted as a senior instructor at the Defence Service Staff College at Wellington, Nilgiris, where he is in charge of training for more than 50 middle-level seniority officers of the three service paramilitary, administrative service, and also officers from friendly foreign countries. He is also the author of several well-acclaimed books. I welcome Sir to present his paper on approaching transboundary perspectives on water in South Asia from a security perspective. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Shivani. Can you hear me at the back there?
Yes, sir, you are
Yes,
audible.
we can all hear you. Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Loud and clear. Very nice. Very nice. So, Ma'am Janki Andaria, members of the TIS, people from NIDM and Oxfam, a very good afternoon to you. And it's always a pleasure to be part of whatever TIS does and what Janki Andaria ma'am always motivates me to do. So I'm here with you to share some of my thoughts that I wrote in the paper on the security perspective of what is being talked about over the last few days. In fact, so much water has already flown under the bridge that I don't think I need to have any, those slides to show you, some maps to show you. All that has been shown over the last few days. So what I've done is I have written down a few, points that I would like to discuss this afternoon with you all. And then thereafter, what I have given in my paper that I had submitted long ago. Last time I was speaking to TIS was about something very close to my heart, something that I had gone through. It was about the tsunami of 2004, and I could rattle out things without it all ingrained in my head. But this time I had to really study hard, and I had written this paper about 6-7 months ago. And suddenly, out of the blue, I was told I'm supposed to present this paper again. So I had to go rush back to my books, rush back to what I had studied, and then I'm here in front of you this afternoon to give you a perspective of security as far as the transboundary cooperation is concerned. Right. So I don't have any slides. I'm going to read something that I have written this about my paper. So let me go back to that. And then basically, I'm trying to analyze the issue of water relations and water security in South Asia with a larger ambit of bilateral relations and national security in the region. I have attempted to trace and analyze the growing importance of water security within national security developments in South Asia and how improved bilateral relations could lead to better security cooperation and improve the water sharing. So, we have been growing, and South Asia continues to grow. The water resources are continuously diminishing. The demand is continuously increasing. And of course, the climate change also has been spoken about. So what impact that has made. So therefore, they're all threats. Such changes have posed threats to our national borders. And due to the large-scale economic migrants and refugees, these can be potential leads to, it can lead to future wars, water wars, if I may call them, in future. So bilateral relations generally shape perceptions in international affairs, and issues like transnational water sharing and security cooperation, which form a part of bilateral relations, significantly depend on relationships between states. So we're going to talk about that in general. So there's a water expert, Ainun Naisat, who says water sharing is not a technical matter, but political. If the political leadership is cordial, then the technical resolution is not a difficult matter at all. And you would agree that, what politics, war is one aspect of, of political agenda that can be used. One of the things that the political masters can use is the instrument of war. So if politics is strong, then we'll have better policies and everything like that. So coming back to what I have written, so we are a big brother, India, who oversees smaller states in the subcontinent, but we have a bigger backdrop, to our north, with bigger brother, if I may call him, China, which technically is not part of this region, but it continues to play a role in altering relationships between India and its neighbors in South Asia. So therefore, we have to look at him also. Okay, so we need to go. And also what I've written in this is we do not need to go into why of things, because adequate has been discussed about why China wants to be where it is and all that. But we need to know how it is going to do it. So therefore, having understood this, we should be able to find alternate means of plugging or negating the Chinese influence by the use of our armed forces, seen being done in good measure in the recent past, right? So in this paper that I've made, I've gone through the relations between India and Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and India and Pakistan mainly, because Bhutan actually really not much can be said about. And then I've also Chinese influence that it completely overshadows everything else in this region, right? So Nepal, like in this for Nepal as a special Nepal is special because it is bordering between Tibet and India, and the Chinese influence in Tibet increased when they took over Tibet in 1955. That is the time they actually came to the gates of Nepal, and the influence in Nepal started. The cat and mouse game continue to be played by the countries, and then I don't think we need to discuss as to where it is going to lead at the end of it all, right? So Indo-Nepal, I've discussed about that we were the biggest trading partners, and the Indo-Nepalese bilateral relations have really not been very steady all throughout, right from the 50s, especially so when the Chinese came to their door. And also now in the recent past, they have also influenced their political setup. They have in fact trying to get the railway right into Nepal. They're going to have a dry port there. So there's a whole lot of things that the Chinese influences happening in Nepal. Also, that we must also think is about how the Nepalese army is now being supplied with equipment and training by the Chinese also. Initially, earlier times, only the Indian army used to train the Nepalese army. Now the Nepalese have gone to the other side also, and a lot they are being dependent on the Chinese for a lot of these military things, right? So thereafter, when of course with increasing cooperation with China, there are fears in India that China can use the influence in Nepal and increase the Indian vulnerability along the northern border. This along, of course, with the BRI that is coming up in Nepal and in Bangladesh and all over. So that also has tremendous impact. In fact, a lot of thinking is going on in India about how whether we should join the BRI, whether we should not join the BRI, and if we join the BRI, what would happen? If we don't join, what would happen? And what is the actual threat of the BRI other than just being economic? Is there a military link to it also? So that is also being discussed to a large extent. As far as India, Bangladesh are concerned, things have been pretty okay. 1971, we formed that state, and we were fairly, happy with our neighbor on our eastern front. But by and large, the only problems that both the countries had was, of course, between the water sharing and, of course, and the porous border through which a large number of refugees used to come and go. So these were actually the two important significant areas of discussion between the states in the bilateral talks used to be these two things, right? So we share actually 54 rivers with Bangladesh, and with us being the upper riparian state, of course, and Bangladesh is at the receiving end. Again, over here also, in the paper, I've discussed about how China is again coming and influencing influencing Bangladesh. Not only that, as in the case of Nepal, there is always the international community sees that there is an Indian high-handedness in the matters of water sharing due to its dominance in the region. Okay, but it is certainly true to some extent. But as we see in international diplomacy, the country which has got the upper hand always tries to get more benefits, whether it be the US or the USSR or the erstwhile USSR or the Russians. They always try, the treaties will be in the bigger brother always tries to take the bigger piece of the cake. So it is in both India's and Bangladesh's interest to ensure that an amicable solution to the water dispute is reached at the earliest. Okay, but this can, of course, the discussions can carry on, the bilateral relations being good, the discussions can carry on. But when it comes to the matter of Brahmaputra River, the tap of which is controlled only by the Chinese, then from the security perspective, the India and Bangladesh must sort out their water issues mutually and then present a unified face to China. That's what I have written, that we must be united in the as far as the Chinese claim over the waters of the Tsangpo or the Brahmaputra are concerned. Okay, so therefore, as part of the BRI, the Chinese relationship I have discussed. In fact, I have also written over there that the Chinese projects they have announced in Bangladesh is up to the tune of $38 billion. In contrast, India has pledged to invest $5 billion, which is also one of the highest amounts that it has invested in any single country around India. Okay, so just $5 billion, and Chinese are getting in $38 billion worth of projects, right? So as far as arms exports and things are concerned, the Chinese have become the biggest arms exporter to Bangladesh from 2017 onwards. Before that, Bangladesh was quite dependent on some of the Indian equipment that was being given. And in fact, in a large amount of second-hand Indian equipment, military equipment was given to Bangladesh for use for enhancing their security. Okay, so now, of course, there's a significant transfer of military hardware from China to Bangladesh. And of course, India, Pakistan, the lesser said, the better. There's been mayhem all throughout since 1947. As of today, still volatile, militancy, extreme mistrust. I mean, it's not distrust, mistrust, you can use any word. We just don't see eye to an eye about anything and everything. So therefore, there are a multitude of problems between us. And the most, surprisingly, the most stable area has been the Indus Water Treaty of 1960. Very surprising that one of the, it has been one of the stable points of Indo-Pakistan diplomacy, the IWT, that is the Indus Water Treaty. So, of course, this is under the aegis of the World Bank, and maybe because World Bank has got enough muscle power to wield, so we have been able to both control ourselves in this area. Other than that, of course, Pakistan always has an insecurity that we have got all the rivers in our control, and we could actually severely restrict the water supply. And like the Vular Barrage, the Baghliyar, the Kishinganga dams, they've always been a bone of contention between both the states. And the Pakistani authorities, of course, believe that the IWT was relevant for us when it was signed, but in the changing conditions, we need to work on it again. But India's, they've also gone to the International Court of Arbitration, but not much progress has been made. Although India has, said that they've denied the claim completely. Okay. Very recently, you would have heard about, India has just commented on the restricting water flow to Pakistan sometime in 2019-20, end of 2019, actually. Then there was a absolute uproar in Pakistan, and Pakistan was running helter-skelter as to what to do. But you know what? I was just thinking, if I was a commander, military commander, and I was asked to get Pakistan on its knees tomorrow, I would release excess waters into the dammed rivers that I have and flood most of the agricultural belt of Pakistan, leading to, they'll just come down on their knees and they will not be able to fight. But then how will it be seen by the international community is another question. I'm just talking like the devil's advocate. So it can be done, and China, in fact, has got plans to do such mischief, right? Basically, what the entire paper I've written is about how India's neighbors share transboundary water and have multiple grievances regarding the Indian dominant position in the matter. And while it is true to some extent, it must be considered that water security is a prime concern, and all states are attempting to ensure availability of water for the present and for the future. So therefore, there is often a lack of clarity between states as to their goals, stemming from the lack of trust in neighboring states, and then, of course, fluctuating bilateral relation, minor issues leading to major issues, and therefore talks failing and everything coming to a naught. So this is what my paper is all about. Of course, the Chinese, I've also spoken a little bit about the Chinese growth graph and the influence in South Asia, and how the Chinese influence has a way of negating or neutralizing India's dominance in South Asia, which will lead to other problems, related problems that I have spoken about. Okay. So, at the end, of course, I just want to a quick analysis of the Indo-Chinese water issues. We have, on Twitter and all went gaga over the recent floods that happened in Uttarakhand, that the Chinese had triggered an earthquake leading to some kind of this water coming down in vast quantities. What is true or not true is not for me to talk about, but whatever little I have learned, whatever little I have studied about, they have got the capability to throttle you or give you access as and when they want to, and therefore they can use it as a tool of military diplomacy, right? So how can we negate that? Well, your young minds, I want you to think about it, write about it, and of course, I'm also going to give my point of view about what can be done. Right. In the end, of course, I can say that water relations cannot be studied in isolation, and it's a part of overall bilateral relations of the region, and presently an important part. It should be. It has become a very, very important part of national security. So therefore, to understand how water resources have been shared, perceptions of state as shaped by prior and existing bilateral relations need to be considered. The role of history, of course, assumes importance, as historical disputes or misunderstandings have influence on bilateral relations even today, right? And thereafter, then, of course, cooperation, coordination, and all that I have written about. And the states of South Asia must ensure unity. In the end, I write that, the states of South Asia must ensure unity in terms of water security, so that in case of future crises, these can ensure that the region overall does not suffer from bad choices. Is it in India's best interest to initiate and develop such cooperation amongst its neighbors? Well, that's the question that we need to discuss. With that, I have finished. I think I have taken the allotted time that I have. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. And over to you, back to you, to the conduct.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you very much for a very sort of different and a security perspective. And I think you talk about the real world, which is true. I mean, I think a strong instrumental sort of perspective on what we actually need to do and how do we protect our borders. I think that is really what drives our security concerns. And thank you for that. Much to be debated out there, because in negotiating borders, we often forget the local communities. And I think, I'm sure all of us were a bit alarmed when you said that these are possibilities that we can flood. I mean, either we can flood Pakistan's agricultural lands, or that China is planning to do that with us. And those are the kinds of concerns which one needs to be aware of. And I think the framing that when we talk about transboundary water governance, I think as a government, as a nation, perhaps these are things that drive us. But then how exactly does one negotiate, the lives of millions of people that could be affected, and they are actually, in a manner of speaking, caught in the crossfire for no fault of theirs. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it raises very, very critical questions. And I think this is why we like the debate around different perspectives. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Janaki ma'am. Thank you, Nitin sir. Now I would like to invite Hassan Momin Gorkhe Chakraborty to present a paper on living with uncertainties, life, livelihood, and location in an interstate border. Can we have the presentation, please?
Shivani ma'am, I could not find Hassan in the panelist list also, and not in the attendees list.
Okay.
Maybe he's not here. Maybe he's not here. We can.
He joined in for a few minutes. I think we can move on to the next person.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Rituparna Chaudhary to present a paper on making of the Brahmaputra, its conflicts, dynamics, and the geopolitical status in relation to its riverine community. Over to you, Rituparna Chaudhary. Can we have the presentation?
Rituparna, can you unmute yourself, please? Rituparna?
I have unmuted her, ma'am, but are you there, Rituparna?
Can she say hello to us so that we know that she is... Rituparna, can you just say hello to us?
Thank you.
Ma'am, she is muted.
Karan, can you just call her up?
Yes, ma'am.
Rituparna, can you hear us?
Ma'am, she is muted.
Ma'am, she's been informed. She's trying to do it.
Right. So maybe we can move on to the next person. Rituparna, as soon as you join in, please just drop a message.
I think we can move to the next presentation.
Yes.
Sure. Now I would like.
I think we have Rituparna. Rituparna, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
here.
okay.
Could you give me just 2 seconds? Yeah, I'll be back in a while. Hello? Hello?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yes, am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon. So, may I know how to share this screen actually? How do I do that?
There's this share button on your screen.
Share content?
Right next to
Start
video.
It's a share content, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, because this is the first time I'm doing a meeting over WebEx. So,
No
yeah,
problem. We all live and learn, no issues.
yeah,
We are
right.
very sympathetic to all the first time presenters.
Oh, thank you
And the
so much.
effort that you make, we much appreciate. So
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
No
Good
worries.
afternoon. Yes.
Only thing,
Is my
Rituparna, please
yeah?
be a little louder because you are a bit soft. So
Sure,
if you're
sure.
a
Yeah,
little louder, that will be
yeah.
useful. Maybe come closer to
Obvious.
the mic. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Just advance it to the side.
is my screen visible? I have shared it actually. I have shared my content.
Not yet. Sometimes there is a time lag.
It happens probably.
Yes, now it's coming on. Yeah.
Coming.
It's visible.
Yes, it'll happen in a minute.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Hold on, not yet happened. One sec. Right now we are seeing a white screen.
Mm-hmm.
Is your first slide blank?
No, the first slide talks about the title of the conference.
No, but then we can't see it. I think it's coming on. Just wait for
Yes,
the count of
surely.
10. I think it should come on.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, can you just show us your face so that we can say hello to everybody?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yes, definitely. Wait for a few seconds. I'm so sorry. I'm a little technologically handicapped at times. It happens. Start my video. Yeah, am I visible now?
Yes,
Yes.
you're visible now.
Okay.
But now we have
Is my
lost your screen.
screen right? Yes.
You lost your screen share.
Yeah, so I'll share it again. Just a few seconds.
Okay, you can switch off your video. I think that will help.
Yes, better. Is the screen visible now?
Thoda rukna. Not yet. It will come on.
Not yet.
It's. Where are you located? Where are you calling from?
Okay, I'm calling from Guwahati.
Okay.
Yes.
Not yet visible, but hopeful that it will come on.
Okay, hopefully. I have good network right now.
I think sometimes there is a lag. You know.
It happens.
While she's doing that, do you want to introduce, or you've already introduced Rituparna?
Ma'am, I introduced her already.
Okay, fine. All right.
Is it still visible? I'm getting a little nervous.
Rituparna, ma'am, are you trying to share your screen using mobile?
Yes.
Maybe because of that, there is little lag. So
Okay, do I do it over my laptop?
yes, I think that will be more easier. Or if you are uncomfortable with that also, I will suggest you to just send a copy of your presentation to any of the organizers. Then we will present your slide from our end, and you can.
Better. Surely. So I mail my PPT?
Yes, so what
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can do now, you can stop screen share, Rituparna, and we will have the
Yes.
next set of
Yes,
presenters
ma'am.
present.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
while they are presenting, you can do the reorganizing, the emailing of your PowerPoint to the organizers, okay? And
Okay,
we
sure.
will make sure that somebody else is able to control it. And then you can
Okay.
also try
Yes.
your logging in from your laptop. Okay,
Okay,
so
sure, sure.
probably we bring in the next presenter,
Okay.
Shivani.
Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah.
Rituparna, can you
Yes, ma'am.
mail it to the roundtable ID or to Saran?
Okay, sure. I'm doing it right now. Okay. Thank you
you.
so much.
So for the next presentation, I would like to invite Mr. Shani Jaiswal and Asutosh Jaiswal to present on an analytical study of transboundary cooperation of river water in the context of India and its neighbor countries.
Okay. So net. Stop sharing. You are sharing your screen live. Okay. I have.
Screen, Ashutosh, we can see the screen. Hello, Ashutosh.
Hello. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, today's my topic is an analytical study of transboundary cooperation for river water in the context of India and its neighbor countries. The second, the context with about 4% of the water resources of the world, India should have been a water equipped nations. However, in 2011, India's turned into water state nation. India is currently ranked 120 among 122 country on the Water Equality Index as per a report by Niti Aayog. It issues the largest amount of groundwater, 24% of the global total, more than that of China and the US combined. The next point is UN reports estimates that by 2030 water demand in India will grow to almost 1.5 trillion cubic meters from approximately 714 billion cubic meter. The next point, this situation is further aggravated by the India's water disputed with its neighbor and interstate river water dispute in India. India's water disputes with its neighbors. Water remains politically contested issue in much of South Asia. The region is facing water storage and aggregation difficulties, and it will continue to face increasing demand uh, on energy and water with rapid industrializations. Over extraction of groundwater is of particular concern with an estimated 23 million pumps in use across Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. Moreover, salinity and arsenic uh, contamination affect over 16% groundwater in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Combine these factors with the impact of climate change that is reducing the amount of water in the Brahmaputra basin and changing the patterns of water flow. Under such circumstances, the increasing need for power and stable water level could prompt reconsideration in bilateral water sharing treaties in future. Page 4. Where is the page? Next page. India-China waters dispute. Both Brahmaputra and the glacier that feed Ganga originated in China. As an upstream riparian region, China maintains an advantageous position, can build infrastructure to intensely prevent water from flowing downstream. Owing the previous tendencies where the China have been uh, re reluctant to provide details of its hydropower project, and there is a trust deficit between the two neighbors. China's dam building and the water division plans along the Brahmaputra called Yarlung Jangbo in China, in a source of tension between the two neighbors despite the two having signed several MOUs on strengthening communication and strategic trust. As lower riparian countries, India and Bangladesh rely on the Brahmaputra waters for agriculture. China has now plans to build 4 more dams on the Brahmaputra in Tibet. Both India and Bangladesh worry that these dams will give Beijing the ability to divert or store water in uh, times of political crisis. India, for its part, has built dam on the Tista River, a tributary of the Brahmaputra, to uh, utilize the flow of Tista during the dry season. India, Bangladesh sharing the water of Tista River, which originated in the Himalayas and flows through Sikkim and West Bengal to merge with the Brahmaputra in Assam, Jammu Kashmir in Bangladesh, is perhaps the most contentious issues between two friendly neighbors, India and Bangladesh. The river covers nearly the entire floodplains of Sikkim while draining 2,800 square kilometers of Bangladesh, governing the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. The next point is for West Bengal, Tista is equally important, considered the lifeline of half a dozen districts in North Bengal. Bangladesh has a south-on equitable distribution of Tista waters from India on the lines of the Ganga Water Treaty of 1996 agreement to share surface water at the Farakka barrage near their mutual border, but no avail. In 2015, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visit to Dhaka has generated some expectation to take forward the previous issue on fair and equitable water sharing agreement. But Tista remains an unfinished project, as in India, individual states have a significant influence over transboundary agreement. This arrangement sometimes impedes the policy making process. For example, one of the key stakeholders of the Tista agreement, West Bengal, is yet to endorse the deal. So here is the map, Bangladesh major river basin, and India, Nepal. Water cooperation between Nepal and India have been agreements signed on major rivers like Kosi, Gangatoki, Karnali, or Mahakali, essentially for large hydroelectric and irrigation project by building dams or barrages. No project except the Kosi barrages has been completed. It smaller rivers have also been ignored since 1954, when the Kosi agreement was signed between India and Nepal. Talks between the two government have stalled, and water right issue have not been addressed. There have been various disputes over the agreement fueled by floods in the Kosi region. India and Nepal have also had disputes over the issues of compensations of the Koshi Dam. Moreover, Nepal had considered India's constructions an encroachment on Nepal's territorial sovereignty. The problem with the Kosi River is the high level of sedimentations, and embankments have proven to be ineffective to tackle the sedimentation. The only available option in this case is storage tank, and these cannot be set up without the cooperation of Nepal. India and Nepal have traditionally disagreed over the interpretation of the Suguli treaties signed in 1816 between the British East India Company and Nepal, which delimited the boundary along the Mahakali River in Nepal. India and Nepal differ as to which stream uh, uh, constitute, uh, constitutes the source of the river. The dispute between India and Nepal might seem minor, but it gains strategic importance because the dispute area lies near the Sino-Indian border. India-Pakistan water dispute. Both India and Pakistan since partitions have experienced frictions over various water conflicts. The country's early leaders anticipated the fires, uh, fears rivalry over the water that connect their volatile border. As the result, after numerous dialogue and through careful negotiation, both countries signed an accord called the Indus Water Treaty in 1960, which clearly determined how the region rivers are to be divided. In the treaty, control over three eastern rivers of the Beas, Ravi, and Satluj was given to India, while Pakistan got the control over western river of the Indus, Chenab, and Jhelum. The Indus Water Treaty has been widely hailed as a success, having survived three post-independence wars between the two hostile neighbors. However, the situation of Pakistan has changed significantly from 1916 till present moment, as it is now on brinks of water scarcity. The source of or flow of all the Pakistan's rivers pass through India first, so this naturally provides India with the upper hand and in controlling the outflow of these rivers. The Indian government has more than 40 projects that are either already completed or in the proposal stage on the Western River. The carrying of such activities within the Western River has wrecked Pakistan. On the other hand, India keeps dismissing these accusations of Pakistan's as baseless and without any scientific backing. India's Indus River dispute. In 205, Pakistan's change India's 450 MV Baglihar Dam project on Chenab River before the World Bank, but lost the case in the end. In 2011, both countries went head to head again the International Court of Arbitrations (ICA) over India's 330 MV project in Kisan Ganga project in Jammu and Kashmir. The latest dispute is over hydroelectric project that India is building along a Chenab River. According to Pakistan, this project violates the treaty and will impact its water supply. India and India.
Ashutosh, sorry to disturb you, but your time is up. If you could wrap it up.
Yeah. It's a second last page.
Yeah.
India and Bhutan. India and Bhutan's hydroelectric power cooperation started more than 5 decades ago. Initially, the cooperation was based on development of small-scale hydro projects such as Tala, Chuka, and Kuruchu. Bhutan has the potential to generate 30,000 MV of hydropower in 2006. Both countries inked a power purchase agreement for 35 years that would allow India to generate and import 5,000 MV of hydropower from Bhutan, the quantum of which increased 10,000 MV in 2008. On the other hand, the people of Bhutan raised objection to such project on long-run effects in the country. For instance, if Bhutan ever decide to construct storage project, issues will get intense and more problematic when it comes to deal with India. The internal challenges in Bhutan is water accessibility. Conclusion: everyday policy concerns like water sharing and uses often receive less attention are combined with a large security or border concerns or are dealt with only when natural disaster occur. And water politics has far-reaching consequences for the prosperity and security of country. While this transboundaries issues in integral to the national development policy of this country, it needs better analysis and understanding on the part of countries involved in transboundary water sharing agreement. The water dispute in South Asian subcontinent uh, deal with the complex orientations of the river of the region that cut across some countries in the region, uh, complemented by a tense and uncompromising geopolitical situation amongst the fellow riparian countries bring out of the strategic role played by water in the region.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. For the next presentation, I would like to invite Rituparna Chaudhary to present her paper on making of the Brahmaputra, its conflicts, dynamics, and geopolitical status in relation to its riverian communities. Over to Rituparna Chaudhary.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
To the esteemed panel, this is Rituparna from Guwahati. May I thank the concerned team for selecting my abstract for this theme, that is on shifting lands, flowing waters, transboundary cooperation for water and related issues in South Asia. So the topic that I have taken,
Rituparna, can you speak a
yes,
little louder, please?
louder than this? Okay.
Yes, or come
Thank you
closer
for
to your
reminding.
mic. Yeah.
Mic. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So let me start again. Let me restart. So hello everyone. Good afternoon to the esteemed panel. This is Rituparna Chaudhary, and I thank the concerned team for selecting my abstract for this conference, which is on shifting lands, flowing waters, transboundary cooperation for water and related issues in South Asia, organized by the concerned institutions. So the abstract that I had sent and which has been selected was titled on the making of the Brahmaputra, its conflicts, dynamics, and geopolitical status in relation to its riverine communities, which has been kept under the theme of today's panel, which is water governance, security, and protection. So before I start off with the presentation, I want to clarify on one perspective, which is that today's presentation, when I had sent the abstract, I had mentioned that for the paper it will be based on both primary and secondary data collection, which I'll be conducting for writing the full paper. But for today's presentation, this has been totally confined to secondary literature because I wanted to give a summation of what my paper will look like. So this is a presentation, so I'll sum up what are the themes that I wanted to touch on regarding the river Brahmaputra and its relation to the riverine communities, or say in short, the river communities of Assam. In the context of South Asia, which should not be forgotten. So my second slide basically shows the river Brahmaputra and how it flows through its origin in the Kailash range from that particular glacier called Chema Yungdung through Arunachal, Assam, and Bangladesh before it flows into the Bay of Bengal. So this is the first, this is second introductory slide which shows the Brahmaputra flowing through its origin into the Bay of Bengal. I put this slide primarily because my presentation and my topic is on Brahmaputra and its relation to the riverine community, and hence I decided to put this slide in the very foremost part of my presentation. So the next slide goes on to give a small introduction or a description about the river. So the Brahmaputra, as we majorly or popularly know, is a major river of Central and South Asia, and it flows for around 1800 miles, which is around 2,900 kilometers from its source in the Himalayas to its confluence with the Ganga, after which it flows into the or it empties into the Bay of Bengal. So along its course, the Brahmaputra passes through the Tibet Autonomous Region of China, then through the Indian states of Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, as well as Bangladesh, which is one of the most formative nations of South Asia. So for most of its length, the river serves as an important inland waterway. It serves as an important source of providing inland water communication for the people along its banks. However, it is not, navigable between the mountains of Tibet and the plains of India. And in its lower course, the river is both a creator and a destroyer. So as the river flows through the region, in its lower course, the river becomes either a creator or a destroyer because it starts depositing huge quantities of fertile alluvial soil, but also causing disastrous and frequent floods. So how the river meanders through the valley and how it creates the situation of flood is also a very important part when we understand the river Brahmaputra in relation to its riverine communities. The river has been having significant relationship with its riverine communities, or say river community. if I need to give one example, I came up across a very interesting article over third pole, where the writer called named or one Sajjad Hussain described that because the riverine communities or the people living on the sides of the river, they have a very impactful relation with the river, be it in terms of agriculture or be it in terms of tourism sector or be it in terms of the effects of the river which are felt by the people in terms of floods or the whole situation of depositing fertile soil or alluvial silts. So the idea of the river meetings are very empowering. So when we talk of the idea of its relation to the riverine community, the first idea which struck in my mind was the idea of conducting river meetings, which can also be known as Nodi Boitok. So Nodi Boitok is an Assamese term primarily, but it can also be used in Bengali, which means river meetings, so how people feel empowered to talk of the river or to talk of bringing changes in community relations, because how the river keeps shifting its course and the impact of the shifts in people's lives. For example, in situations of flood, that is the primary source of conflict that happens between the people and the river concerned. So this is one prime example or source of knowledge that we can think of, the concept of river meeting or Nodi Boitok, as we can call it. So in connection to this very concept, the next slide comes to an image or a figure of how people gather along with different organizations or stances of civil society and how they conduct the concept of Nodi Boitok. So this picture actually comes from Bangladesh, and I have also mentioned the picture credit because I've taken it from a particular formal source. So this is an example from Bangladesh where Nodi Boitok takes place, and this is how Bangladesh it also comes into context because the river flows through this particular South Asian nation. So the river Brahmaputra, we cannot call it particularly affecting Indian state, but it also affects the state of Bangladesh because through Bangladesh it flows through the Bay of Bengal. So Bangladesh, I have mentioned there when I wrote below that Bangladesh is crucial in context of the history of Brahmaputra as the river flows through this nation before flowing into the Bay of Bengal. So now, according to my title of the paper, I have pointed out 3 areas of concern, 3 areas of the river under study in relation to its riverine communities or say river community. First is the idea of conflict. Then I have mentioned about the idea of dynamics, and thirdly about the geopolitical status. So in short, I will not go into details, but in short, when we talk of conflict, if seen through the sociological lens, because I am from sociology background, so conflict seen through sociological lens can be understood as a concept that focuses on the competition or the idea of having a dialectical relation or a state of contradiction that occurs between 2 objects or 2 primary conditions in our society or say in any socio-economic or political situation. So in this context of my paper, when I talked about the river and the river community, so here conflict will be seen mainly in terms of the relationship of the river community with the river. So what kinds of areas of conflict are being faced by the people in relation to the Brahmaputra River. This will be tried to make sense in the context of how riverine communities understand their relationship with the river Brahmaputra. That is the main area of understanding when we talk of conflict. Now, I have mentioned in my last point about the instances of conflict. So the most popular or the most common problem or situation of disaster which we can think of in terms of conflict is the idea of flood. For example, say there have been around 25 major floods since 1950 over the Brahmaputra. So since that particular year, immediately after independence, the Brahmaputra River has witnessed over 25 major floods. And across India back in 1977, so that was around the time after the liberation war of Bangladesh, around that particular phase, across India, more than 11,000 people died in 1977 alone, which is another statistical data being provided. Another instance of a very unfortunate year was 2012 when 2 million people were left homeless only for the flood situation that was happening. And these data that I have collected come from no other source but a very reliable source, that is BBC News. Yes, and another area of conflict which I want to mention is the idea of the river being a battleground for hydroelectric project. So how do we understand the idea of the river being a battleground? For example, the whole concept of fighting over the hydroelectric projects like the Lower Subansiri hydroelectric project is a prime example, witnessing severe opposition about these projects and the whole concept of the river being possessed or owned by China and the whole debate of Indo-China conflict. All these concepts come under the larger purview or the term of conflict in my paper. And the next is an image of a flood situation which has been taken in the context of the city of Guwahati, and I have also given my picture credit here. Then we come to the idea of dynamic. So in the context of dynamic, I have particularly understood it as a concept of change, mostly positive change. So what are the different ways by which the river has contributed to bringing positive changes in people's lives? How has the river been a facilitator in enabling positive changes in community living or in community participation? So I've given examples here. For example, the river is primarily known as the economic lifeline of Assam. Brahmaputra is actually the only river in India which is considered as a male river. We call it the son of Brahma, that's why Brahmaputra. So this river is known as the economic lifeline of Assam. And this river has given a number of services. It has made a lot of services easier for people. For example, it has given the operation of ferry services. It has given the operation of cruise tourism. The tourism sector has increased incredibly because of the service that the river has been able to give through cruise ships. And CNN International in 2013 also recognized Brahmaputra cruise as one of the top 10 most adventurous cruises, which is considered in the whole Indian nation. So this is another factor which we can think of in understanding the idea of the dynamic or bringing changes in the entire concept of South Asia. In this context, primarily Assam, because when we talk of the operation of ferry service, but of course, it doesn't only it does not only confine to Assam, it can also go beyond, for example, the nation of Bangladesh as well, when we talk of tourism, river tourism, or the operation of ferry service, or whatever the positive facilities being provided because of the river. This is in the context of the dynamic. So the image shows as a cruise running over the Brahmaputra, which is a source of tourist income and a source of facilitation for people who have a huge concern over the running of the river or its relation to how people understand the river's functioning in the context, in the geopolitical or social context as well. Thirdly, I have come to the slide of how we can understand the river in terms of the geopolitical status. So when we talk of geopolitical status, we think of the geopolitical status of the river in context of its relation to the people. And the narrative for today's presentation, which I have chosen here, is the narrative of Indo-China relation and the geopolitics of water. So, for example, if we understand the concept of Indo-China relation, China has claimed express ownership over Tibet's waters. So because the Brahmaputra flows through the region of Tibet across the glacier and it enters northeast through Arunachal, then flows through Assam. So the element or the geopolitical boundary or the area of Tibet becomes very necessary to understand China's claim over or ownership over Tibet's water. And hence it is made as an upstream that controls 7 of South Asia's mightiest rivers, which are the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, Irrawaddy, Salween, Yangtze, and Mekong. So we have to try to figure out how the concept of understanding the geopolitical conflict or the idea of ownership or possessing the waters of the river becomes a state of dissent or a state of the idea of locating power or sharing power in context of India and China. This is the point or argument I wanted to make in this presentation for today. And yes, lastly, in context of the slide that I presented just now, this shows the entire it's a political map where the rivers of the Tibetan plateau are being shown and how they share their political boundaries and they're flowing to the respective water bodies. So yes, this was shortly a summation of the presentation which I wanted to make. And in my last slide, for your better understanding and also for me, I have pointed out a few of the references from which I have tried to point out the areas of concerns of my paper. And yes, so these are the sources that I have taken from to understand this theme or the theme of my paper in a better manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
For the last presentation today, I now invite Dr. Jacqueline Joseph and Shobit Shafe. Dr. Jacqueline Joseph is a professor at the Jamshedji Tata School of Disaster Studies in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Her research, field action, and teaching at the school are around psychosocial care and support in disaster and humanitarian contexts. The Indian Ocean Tsunami 2004, Mumbai Terror Attack 2008, AMRI Hospital Fire 2011, and Nepal Earthquake 2015 are some of the recent disasters where she continues long-term engagement through research and field action in the psychosocial domain. Mr. Shobit Shafe is a Terosa lead at Oxfam India. He holds degree in disasters adaptation development from King's College London. His research interests include transboundary water governance, civic engagement, disaster risk reduction, and science in disaster. May I request you to please present your paper on Pendai, small rivers, riparian rights, and transboundary conflicts.
Shivani, I think Hassan Momin also has to present his paper. Okay, he's here. He was amongst the attendees, but he's now here. So after this paper, there'll be one more paper.
Hello, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Hassan.
Yes, actually, my share, I have PPT and my share option is invisible and not visible.
Hassan, we'll have Jacqueline Joseph and Shobhit presenting first, and then we'll add you.
Also ask,
okay, ma'am.
Yes, and why don't you email your presentation just in case there is a problem? Please email your presentation to us, and if there is an issue about screen share, we can use, help you with that. Thank you. Yeah, so Shobit, you are welcome now.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Shivani. Jacqueline, ma'am, also here. So, Jacqueline, ma'am, would you like to begin? And I would ask NIDM to kind of give me the permission to share the screen.
Yeah. So while Shobit is kind of uploading his slide, just want to give the background of this paper. This was part of our work as part of the FROSAF grants that we had received for exploring transboundary water governance and civic engagement. We started exploring transboundary water governance and civic engagement. However, we ended up detailing or asking more questions around what alternative arrangements can be kind of made to kind of fill the gap in current formal institutional arrangements. So this case study kind of brings forward that it kind of we locate ourselves from the critical institutionalism perspective, where we talk about hybrid institutions. We don't kind of bring that in the presentation here, but that's the context in which the presentation is structured, where we look at how socio-cultural aspects could kind of club with formal criteria, strategies, professional knowledge to kind of come up with local solutions, because the communities in the periphery have been continuously failed by formal institutional arrangements, even within the country. So what do we expect on transboundary governance arrangements? So what could be a solution to their problems that they face is something that we explore through this one case study of the Pandai Small River. Over to Shobhit.
who studied transboundary rivers.
Shobit, you're muted.
Sorry, just a second. I can't see. Am I audible? I'm not on mute. Probably my voice is low.
Yes, you are audible.
You are audible, but you need to make it into slideshow mode.
Yes, yes, yes. Am I audible now and is it visible?
Yes, yes. It is visible.
So I'll be picking up from I'll be picking up from what some of the filters, for example, Shavaik Siddiqui ji and Eklavya Prasad ji have talked about small rivers or marginalized rivers. So we looked at a small river in Bihar called Pandai. It is a river that flows from Nepal into India at the Bihar-Nepal border. And there is a village called Bikna Tori through which it passes. Now, the village had been recognized by the British during their rule as a revenue village. They also built a railway line to transport valuable forest timber from the Valmiki Nagar, now the Valmiki Nagar forest reserve that it is located. Bikna Tori is also a village that used to be and that used to be on the old transit route for Buddhist monks and travelers between India and Tibet, and that is how the name Bikna Tori comes in. Is the word it is a colloquial word for Bikna is a colloquial word for bhikshu, and Bikna Tori then becomes the resting spot for the bhikshus. So the India-Nepal relationship that few of the presenters have also talked about is a 1850 kilometer open border. It is unique and unparalleled relationship between the two countries that scholar B.C. Upreti talks about. And the relationship is not just due to the geographical vicinity or the geographical nearness that is between the countries, but it is also due to the social and cultural ties. So in that, it is a shared heritage. And that shared heritage is at the people-to-people level as well as at the diplomatic level. On water cooperation, like Shavaik ji and others have talked about, it is mostly project-based and caters to the national interest perspective rather than the local interest perspective. In that, it also only takes care of the large rivers. So, for example, the Mahakali, Kosi, Ganda, these are the large rivers that flow through Nepal into India. Now, scholarly work also focuses on these rivers, barring a few scholars like Shavaik Siddiqui ji that are talking about. And about the Pandai now, the Pandai is the major source of water for all usages in Bikna Tori. The terrain in the region is rocky, and then due to that, groundwater extraction is difficult and expensive. It is not only the major source of water, but it is also the major source of conflict in that area. The primary reasons for that being water unavailability and divergent riparian. We'll talk about this in the coming slide. Now, the Pandai is marked by high variation flows like the many rivers and streams in the region. During monsoons, these rivers swell and cause through floods and flash floods in the region. But in the summers, they run dry and there is a problem of water. Now, there are 4 major channels according to the locals. Some also consider three channels as the major channels through which water sharing is done through the Pandai. These channels have been created by the construction of bunds or earthen dams. Now, 2 of these are set to flow into India, and 2 of them, if we consider 4 channels, then 2 of them are utilized upstream in Nepal. Now, what has happened is the locals, they allege that the Nepalis, the upstream community in Nepal, they have started diverting water from the 2 downstream channels that flow into India. The Nepalis, on their part, they assert territorial sovereignty, saying that these flow through our land, so we have the right to use these waters. And in India, the communities assert their territorial integrity and chronological, saying that these waters have been flowing through our territory, and hence they are also we also have a right on them. According to the SSB camp officer that's located in Bignori, who is located in Bignatoli, the conflict has been brewing for about 20 years now, and it is at its peak every year in March or April when the water level is. There used to be a traditional water sharing arrangement between the locals in the region, between the locals of Thori and Bignatoli. But that has declined, and there is a failure to replace that according to the changing conditions. Now, a lot of this conflict is also due to a changing landscape and terrain. The terrain is the region across the border Nepal through which the river flows. So it comes down through the mountains and into the terrain plains. The terrain plains are also, part of it is also located in India, but here we are talking about the changing landscape in Nepal. Now, earlier it used to be a forest land, but then the government Nepal started settling people in that area, and the forest began to be cleared. This also, this also brought in, this also invited squatters who thought, this is a good opportunity and came in and chopped more forest to find land to settle upon. This whole thing led to a change in land use patterns, and which consequently led to a change in water usage pattern. Earlier, in the upstream, most water was used for livestock rearing. Slowly, as the forest began to be cleared and agriculture began to be practiced, a lot of paddy and maize began to be grown, and that this required a lot of water. So the changing water usage pattern also meant that it led to erosion and flooding downstream, because the water did not have anywhere else to go. It caused a lot of downstream. So coming to Bignatoli, Bignatoli is located in the Valmiki Nagar Tiger Reserve, and that comes with its own problems. So since it is a reserve forest, there are regulations that need to be followed, and that means that infrastructure development is next to impossible. The old line that the British had set up is now obsolete, but a new line has not been cut because of the forest regulations. Apart from that, the forest department has also banned stone mining, which has disproportionately affected the local tribals. So the indigenous community in these areas in the Indo-Nepal border are the Tharus, who used to do a lot of stone mining and other works, other livelihoods related to the river. This also has increased the ban on mining, has also increased the erosion, and has led to the shallowing of the channel, which is causing more floods. Apart from that, this has also been affected by local politics, the Bignatoli local politics, the Bihar politics, state politics, which has meant that after the mining there have been litigations. Then after litigations, it has fallen into a limbo, and now the mining is carried out through a contract-based system, which has made the price of which has made shot up the price of the stone, and also caused the loss of local livelihoods. Apart from that, like I talked about groundwater extraction being difficult, and the government only giving solar pumps and panels for extracting agriculture, which in themselves are not of much use during the winters or parts of monsoons. This has caused a complete dependence on Pandai for water, and subsequently, when there is a lot of problem on water, there has also been migration from the area to other parts of the state and the country. Now, the other problems that forest has caused is there is a toll tax that has been imposed along the road to the village, which has caused problems like when there's say for example, when there is a wedding in the village. So if someone comes from outside the village into the village, they have to pay that tax. And since it is a village and that to one in a forest, there are problems in that. There are also bans on large vehicle entries such as tractors, which causes problems with the animals in the forest. So this has caused a lot of problem to the locals in Biknar. Now, what is also is that the forest department claims that this is Biknatori lies in a forest as opposed to being a revenue village, and it wants the locals to vacate the village. And the locals allege that fake maps have been produced by the department to throw them out of their lands. They also say that the documentary evidence by the government has been poor. Initially, they did not find their names on electoral rolls and did not have other IDs to prove their to have some kind of a documentation. The only thing that they rely on are old British era maps where they are shown as a revenue village. In the last 2 decades, personal ID and land record documentation has begun. So there is some relief for the locals, but it is not much. Now coming to the conclusion, at the heart of the screen, you will see Pandai's water conflict. Now the Pandai's water conflict is not just about the river, not just being there being no formal mechanism or the water arrangement declining. It is also in part due to the marginalization that the locals are facing, like Jacqueline mentioned. And since they are also living with hazards, this marginalization and the conflict has caused much difficulties for the locals in Biknar. Thank you. Jacqueline ma'am, if you'd like to add a word.
Thanks, Shobit. Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Shobit. Now I would like to invite Hassan Momin Gorke Chakraborty to present their paper on living with uncertainties, livelihood, location in an interstate border.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I have a PPT and I have shared.
Hassan, I'm sure you have the link saying that sharing the material. Can you see if you can share it?
Is it visible and right now?
Yes, it is visible.
So good afternoon, all of you. And this my paper title is the Living with Uncertainties, Life, Livelihood, and Location in an Interstate Border, and particularly the interstate border between the Jharkhand and West Bengal. And this is so introduction. A textbook is understanding on land often suggests that it lies outside the terra firma. What is not water is land. A binary is therefore inevitably trusted between the land and water. According to the Kuntol Lahiri in 2014, this binary in knowledge production more Anglo-Saxon than South Asian. False sought in interpreting why Bengal has been historically referred as the riverine island. So if the boundaries between land and water are impermanent and under continuous flux, becomes difficult to interpret solely through binary positivist logic. Moreover, if such a milieu also involves the border between two political administrative categories, the matter gets further complicated. So this paper, the paper discusses such a scenario of a shifting riparian boundary between the Jharkhand and the West Bengal, and the reality of the people inhabiting such spaces. The critical aspect of the life, livelihood, and location are discussed in the analyzing such a changing border. Sir, again, I said that the morphological changes of the Ganga River, particularly the stretch between the Rajmahal Hills and the Farakka Barrage. So the stretch in the river Ganga from the Rajmahal Hills to Farakka, mainly the upstream of Farakka Barrage, exhibit a changing morphometric features like the sinuosity, which is varied in different times, bedding, which is also increased from the past decades, and relates the factors interplays to increase the number of river islands, which along with the change channel width, which resulting in the bank line erosion in the Malda district of the West Bengal. So after that, I also described that the channel migration, which is described from the historic migration zone from the 1924 to 2020 river that involves a vast area and comprises of several blocks in the district of Malda that suffers from the threat of erosion. Also, the river is continuously changing and the main course have been divided into many narrow channels due to avulsion. So the lateral erosion of the river Ganga has increased significantly, where the left bank has eroded far more compared to the right bank of the river Ganga. So also that after that the construction of the Farakka barrage in 1975 influenced the lateral migration, which has increased after the commissioning of the barrage compared to the preceding years or the preceding period. So there are two factors increasing the sinuosity. That the changing the sinuosity of the Ganga river between the Farakka and the Rajmahal Hills. One is the topographic factors, which mainly that the Rajmahal Hills in the western valley margin. One is the Malda Rangpur Ridge acted as a natural barrier on the western side of the Malda district, and that there are two major faults running almost parallel to the Ganga river, which Rajmahal fault along the right bank of the Ganga river and the Malda Kishanganj fault along the left bank of the Ganga river. But the hydrological factors were also not negligible, because after the construction of the Farakka barrage, water velocity during monsoon period and probably the high flash flood are the significant for the change in sinuosity, suggests that the intersectionality of topographical and hydrological factors along with other intervention lead to local scale lateral shifting of the channel, resulting in erosion in the stretch of the river Ganga. So so such a process causing rapid changes in the river course and erosion in the left bank has resulted in the continuous shift in the eastern side of Malda district, particularly in the highest in the Kalichok to block area in the Malda district, and also the most hazardous part in the Malda district. On the other hand, there has been emergence of the land through the reformation in situ. There is a hello. Hello, ma'am. Hello.
We
Yes,
can hear
yes.
you. We can hear you.
I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, thank you. On the other, there has been emergence of land through the reformation in situ or accretion in the western part of the Malda district. A large part of the areas are accreted land in the part of the Sahibganj district in Jharkhand. So basically, the interstate boundary between Jharkhand and the West Bengal are the midstream of the Ganga river. So therefore, due to the meandering types of the river or the meandering nature of the river from the Rajmahal and the upstream of the Farakka, particularly in the Kaliachok block areas, that lead to the emergence of the interstate border. So, these two maps, one is the pre-1990s and another is the post-1990s map. And one is the post 1990s mass of the Malda district. Basically, to look that the Kalichok two blocks the changes the boundary. That's the large part. This part of the land is the very disputed land from the between the Jharkhand and West Bengal government. So therefore the overall period between the 1924 to 2000, the river changes from the left bank, river changes the left bank as the river shifted continuously to the western part of the Malda district. So in the second map, in the first map in the left in the river bank is the from the 1924. This is the 1924 river, and again there is the 1973 rivers, and the this area is the under the river bank of the 2020 river. So for this that the second map, that the 18 villages, for that the 18 villages are under disputed villages, mainly the disputed villages between the Sahibganj and the Malda district. Particularly, this is the Udua block of the Sahibganj district and the Kaliachok 2 block in the Malda district. So therefore, that the changing nature of the river Ganga, along with it being the riparian boundary, has become the main reason forcing of life, livelihood, and location in this region. So first of I say that the life-related uncertainty, particularly that the shifting course of the river Ganga in Malda district has continued to be a contested subject that affect the life of the people. Interestingly, people residing in this land have document approved by the West Bengal government, but they find themselves presently located under the jurisdiction of the Jharkhand government. Some people have two voter ID cards and ration cards. One is issued by the government of West Bengal, which also removed from before the 1970s, and now presently that the issued by the Jharkhand government, which they are regularly cast their vote in the Jharkhand. So due to the confusion, the people who actually the residents of the Malda district are unable to pay land revenue as their location are considered as the disputed villages. So because that the West Bengal government declared in 2000 with section 12 of the WBLR Act that any land gained by the gradual accession to a plot of land within the river or sea after a recess shall vest in the West Bengal state government, and the Rayat who owns the plot of land shall not be entitled to retain such land as an accession thereto. So the changing course of the river accompanied by the erosion lead to the dispute on the land ownership between the government and the people and other the two state government. And the people claim that, and the people also claim that the lands belong to them. And for this matter, land transaction is also the problematic. That if the land re-emerged in the river, it was used mainly for agriculture purposes, but no one show any interest to buy the settle in this land which have emerged recently. Another is the livelihood related issues. So particularly riverbank erosion affects the livelihood significantly. It is observed that income varied in towns of post and pre-erosion. After that, the agriculture happens to be the most vulnerable sector involving crop cost, and the primary due to the long-term erosion and the high water level during floods. Also that the particular in the Malda district in West Bengal, that the labor migration is the very high. Labor migration from the study area are also due to lack of livelihood opportunity. They thereby migrate to various urban areas like the Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore. According to the labor migrant, when I was field survey in this for this paper, that's on the labor migrant said that earlier I was a shopkeeper and also worked in the agriculture field. But when the mighty Ganga came to our door and suddenly washed away everything, I became helpless. Now I am a migrant labor. So that the shifting from the livelihood, shifting from the shopkeeper to the migrant labor. And so loss of agricultural land accompanied by the loss of income generating activities along with the lack of livelihood choices, thus uncertainty and act as a push factor for the migration. Another is the ironically that there is also a pull factor that attracts a segment of the population to these disputed land, mainly the river island, as they become the sites for agriculture production, relatively lower cost of living, limited financial liability, and formal land ownership has less. So another issue the location related uncertainty. So this is mainly the problems of boundary demarcation. So the boundary demarcation issues are not new in this particular area. And according to the Survey of India topographical map 72 P13, that the province and the district boundaries in the Ganga river follows the mean deep water channel and will vary as the course of the deep water channel changes. But again further during 1975, it stated that owing to the changes in the course of the river Ganga, the state boundary between Bihar and West Bengal and the district boundary between Malda and Murshidabad should not be accepted as authoritative. So that issue the revisited in the Pritam Singh Commission report and again stated that the boundary in this portion of the Ganga river follows the main deep water channel and varies as the course of the deep water channel changes. But the West Bengal government declined to agree in consultation with the Survey of India and the intimation of the committee. The boundary between Jharkhand and West Bengal in this reach is under dispute. In this view of the constitutional expert, Bhagavati Prasad Banerjee stated that the borders between the states are fixed as per the constitution, and thereby a change in the course of a river cannot change the interstate border. So according to the member Ganga River Protirod Action Nagorik Committee and committee, the land litigation between two states, particularly the Jharkhand and the West Bengal, are continuing in the Supreme Court of the India and still remain unresolved. we, the committee, demanded for a quick disposal of this matter, but is still pending in this higher court. So according to the local people said that, according to local people and the most of the respondents said that the Ganga has snatched everything from us. House, cultivable land, livelihood, while on the other hand, West Bengal government has snatched away our identity. Uncertainty in these disputed villages have resulted in a government's gap. Because there are no basic amenities, lack of basic amenities like the no primary health center, no primary school, no upper primary school, and the no bank services, no police station, and the no communication. That's the people. And as narrated by a person from these disputed villages, due to unavailability of the institutional health facilities, every child is born at home and are thereby without birth certificate. Their status as residents of a specific state under the Indian Union is thereby always open to doubt and interpretation. So during the field work, this appeared to be an emerging uncertainty among the inhabitants of these disputed villages, which they apprehend may lead to trouble concerning their rights as citizens. And the last and the conclusion part, that the study mainly highlighted that not only a milieu of flags and impairments between land and water, but also a riparian border between two states of India. And another that the riparian border is in a meandering course requires a different approach and model of governance. Otherwise, it complicates life, livelihood, and location, and the people suffer from an identity crisis. And the river dispute in India has often been discussed from the perspective of river water sharing. This study highlights that the dispute resolution framework on dispute resolution should also focus on riparian boundaries and the criticalities that it entails. So that's the left. Otherwise, the life, livelihood, and location lay embedded in multidimensional uncertainties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan Momin. For the next 15 minutes, we'll be having the discussion. I request Mr. Mukunda to guide us through it.
Thank you, Shivani. So it was a very enriching discussion. All the presentations were wonderful, in fact. So starting with, why we are here is basically to start a dialogue, between different stakeholders, between different, the academicians are here, the civil society members are here, state representatives are here. So the fundamental idea is, we should encourage the idea of diplomacy through peace. South Asia has a rich tradition. We have given peace ambassadors to the world, from Buddha to Gandhi, and in between there were so many other great people who have spoken about the idea of non-violence as the only means, as the only way to ensure peace. So we shouldn't think about harming anybody, and the idea of non-violence should be an integral component of our hydrodiplomacy. So because we have suffered a lot in the past because of colonialism, and that was very well discussed in the plenary session by Professor Andharia and Lavanya ji. So we need to focus on understanding what went wrong in the past. What mistakes did the British committed? Because if you look at our ecosystems, if you look at our mountains and rivers, we see this legacy. This exploitation is not just it just didn't just happen in a day. It has a historical basis. Both the presenters were focusing on the previous structural measures, the constructions of dams along the river, and how this has led to how this has impact the water rights of the community. So they were emphasizing on the aspects of social and environmental justice framework. Definitely, the idea of equality, equity, fairness should be at the core of our cooperation measures. And definitely the state has been a failure. And when I speak about the state, definitely I look this through a Hobbesian perspective. And I also advocate that states now need to now need to deviate from a traditional perspective and adopt progressive, progressive strategies in having dialogues with the neighbors and for the larger good of the community living in peripheral areas. So in the past, we have seen that this definitely it has been mostly mechanical, the idea driven through a very mechanical engineering way of looking at water resources, which has not been able to address socio-economic vulnerabilities. We need to counter that, and we need to now look at the lived experiences of the people, which has been discussed by most of the papers. So we need to now look into how we can improve, how we can adapt to the new post-industrial scenario, and how we can protect our own ecosystem from this neoliberal capitalistic hegemony. So while doing so, we also have to first have a fair idea about our own resources. When we are talking about hydro diplomacy, it's not just the river; it also includes the wetlands. And I really support the idea of having dialogues on transboundary aquifers, because this is where we are actually missing. South Asian nations can come together to have dialogue, because this is again for the larger good. We will get ample opportunities to exploit the resources in a sustainable manner, definitely. So, and while doing so, we need to institutionalize people-to-people, ties. And again, I come to the point of how we can ensure local sustainability, how we can have local agendas, and how the macro level policies could be influenced by these macro level plans. So after this, I also we had Avishka Das, who presented on the idea of we need to go beyond geopolitical issues and look at the humanitarian perspective of risks. So she was speaking about traditional knowledge, revival of traditional knowledge system, emphasizing on the idea of peace over conflict. Conflict can be resolved through a healthy diplomacy. So we need to now focus on the idea that just because there are no laws doesn't mean that states can behave in a manner they want, because this is the premise of the Lotus Principle in international politics, that we need not wait. States generally do not they wait for regulations. We need not wait for regulations. There is something called a human law. Human ethics are more important. So anything that's legal may not be ethical. So we need to have more dialogues on the larger idea, larger perspective of hydroethics, and include the community in all our dialogues. Another presentation, it was on the Brahmaputra, wherein Rituparna was speaking about the Nadi Boithak. This is one of the initiatives that has been taken in under the project PROSA as well, because this kind of dialogues help the community to take ownership of their own resources, and they can sit together to tell the policymakers, this is our problem. Maybe you can just have look it through an empathetic lens and devise policies which are pro people, which assures justice, which assures equity. So I was very impressed by another presentation on the Pandya River, because we generally, ignore all those water resources which are not under the, under the ambit of our agreements, or rivers which are being ignored by large-scale projects. So I think this kind of transboundary rivers also need focus, because these are rivers which remain invisible. The population, their voices are not heard much. I was having a view of the presentation when Sovit was speaking about how the amalgamation of reserve forest regulation and lack of infrastructure has led to dependency and migration. I think this is high time that both India and Nepal start having dialogue on this. Not just on this river, but also on other tributaries of the larger Ganga basin, because these tributaries also play a significant role in hydrodiplomacy. And mostly we have been focusing on international cooperation, but sometimes interstate conflicts are more devastating. So I think the case of Jharkhand and West Bengal also needs attention by the policymaker, so that communities living on the banks or living in the riparian areas can access can access the resources and use their full potential to live a good life. The central idea of diplomacy, the point that I was emphasizing even in my own presentation is like, we have been very traditional in our approach. We need to change this. We need to change and have dialogue. State having dialogue with the people directly, unblocking all those hurdles, that leads to disaster. Let us not wait for disasters. And as Sawaiji has mentioned, most of our dialogues are project-based. Let's make it people-based. So overall, the presentations were very insightful. Having summarized, I would now like to invite questions, criticisms, feedback from the participants. You can address it directly to the speaker, or you can write it in the chat box. Thank you. Any questions? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible. May I request the panelists to please put forward their questions?
Is there any question on the Soumya?
No,
could you just have a look at the chat box?
Sir, there is no question in the chat box.
आवाज आ रही?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Mukunda, question from me. May I ask Mukund and Shobit, considering your experience with the TROSA project? Soumya here, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yeah. Mukund, and this is for Shobit also. What do you envisage are you've talked about institutionalization of local of ties between communities. Can you elaborate a little bit on that as to what are the possibilities with respect to, considering you have actual exposure to the area, what are the possibilities for that kind of institutionalization, and what are we looking at? Panchayat level, local level, connecting just community groups. Just a few highlights on that. That'll be good.
Okay, can I also ask another question? This is to Air Commodore Nitin Sathe. I want to understand that when you strategize, whether whether we are looking at Pakistan or Bangladesh or China or Nepal, from a military and security perspective, do you ever call, let us say, the local collector into these discussions, or the collector only has to execute whatever decision is taken? So I just want to kind of understand the dynamics of local level decision making, and whether military perspectives take into account local people, local populations, implications, and is there any space for bringing in people?
I think Nitinji is audible. Yeah. I think he's on mute.
Maybe you can answer the question, your question, Soumya's question, you can answer, Mukund.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, when we're talking about institutionalization, the fundamental problem that we have seen in the field as well is like, it has mostly been civil society driven. So the civil society has its own capacity, has its own perspective, and panchayats are definitely important. But the problem in, because when we say transboundary river, we are giving more emphasis on the nation state. And we are forgetting the idea actually, communities are situated on the river basin rather than, river flowing through the village. So we need to understand that the right to river, when we are talking about this right, it belongs to the people first. Then, if you ask me personally, I think then it belongs to the state. The state comes later. But what has happened traditionally is like, state taking over the resources. And when state take over the resources, it goes, it is always seen through the perspective, through the engineering perspective and through the mechanical perspective. So people are trying their best, because if you go to the, the Mahakali Basin, you will find that it's very difficult to create this sense of conflict between the people. They are so at one. In the Indo-Nepal border, they say the roti beti ka samman. So they have their brothers, they have their sisters living across the border. Marriages are happening, and they're living at one. What people do not have access is to policy decision making, because people have been living in peace and the panchayats have been cooperating. But macro projects, whenever there might be, there are certain requirements, even in peripheral geographies, like say connectivity issues, communication issues, issues of trade. I think these are the things that we can facilitate, and civil society can provide their expertise. In the Indo-Bangladesh border, such initiatives have been taken. Hillside conservation is one idea that is very popular in Bangladesh. The second thing, whenever we talk about information, institutionalizing, people-to-people ties, I will speak this with the limitation that's prevailing now. We are talking about information dissemination. People have been connecting through WhatsApp, through all different means, wherever it's possible. There are areas where there is no internet connection. So people have their own manual, traditional way. But the problem lies because evacuation, strategy has to be designed by the state, because it lies with the state. The authority lies with the state. And that is why sometimes this people-to-people tie, it gets demotivated. It is very difficult to keep up the motivation. I know it might take decades. It might take 2 to 3 decades, or maybe it might happen in just 5 years. But what is more important is to have for the bureaucracy to actually visit these people and talk to them directly, not through other people, not through us. But we can facilitate, provide the platform. We can provide, we can mobilize people. But the fundamental dialogue has to be between the people at the local level. And this is the premise of UN Agenda 21, that every area should have a local agenda. And in peripheral geographies, this is of significant importance, because when two towns, or maybe 2 settlements on both the sides of the river come together, and they can set up their own agenda and they submit it to their respective government, then two governments can have dialogue. Then only this endeavor of institutionalization can be successful. That is my suggestion, along with the problem that I saw it in the field. I think that would be very helpful, because hydro diplomacy these days, it has been traditionally very elite. Let us make it a bit grounded. Thank you.
If I may add to it, to what Unna has said, during my work with Jacqueline ma'am on the Gandak River, also something that we found, there is also now with the state agenda and the national agenda, there is a little mistrust that starts brewing at the local levels also. So what we saw that Nepali community, the Nepalese community at the border saying India this, that, it goes from what their neighboring Indian community does, really what the Indian community, Indian state or Indian community as a whole does. So there is also that mistrust that has started coming up at the borders. So institutionalizing cooperation would also require going back to the local levels, and then establish trust between the people. So there are initiatives that are happening, and like Mukund said, it is mostly at the civil society level. For example, in the Gandak Basin, in Nepal, they've formed the Gandak Nadi Niyantran Sangharsh Samiti, which is in which most of the people are PRIs of the local villages that are affected by the problem. And something similar has to come up in India, and they are trying for that. So there is a chance for that. There is also the space for that. But as Mukund said, it has to go the low level has to meet, and then the demands or whatever ideas are there has to be stable. So yes, thank you.
I would like to emphasize one more point, that is like, what is happening, has been happening since the past few decades, is this idea of, the shock doctrine, that, how neoliberal economists, that has been mentioned in the paper by Professor Andharia. We should also start questioning this, this has just been response-based. We need to now focus more on preparedness-based. Let us not wait for disasters to come. Let us not wait for the problem to occur, but then educate people, in the West, people in elite agencies, people in the academics, as well as that the solution of the problem lies in the community itself. The community has marvelous solutions if you can listen to them once. So that should be important. Otherwise, neoliberal economies will devastate everything, and we are losing time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, can I just, I think Air Commodore probably couldn't hear too well, so I'm going to repeat the question. That when the military strategizes against a neighbor, a neighboring country, when you're doing cross-border work, is there any platform where you take local administration or local people along in order to be a little more sensitive to what's going on at the ground level? Or is the military basically looking at the big picture? And is there any way in which you look at local communities and local concerns? Because that's the question. Because in this sort of section, we have been talking about protection and security. So, security can be interpreted as larger military level security of a nation. The other is to look at it in terms of community security. We hear a lot about how all the cross border bombings that take place in India and Pakistan, local communities have had to bear the brunt, and they either disappear in some other place, or there's a lot of local level suffering that happens when the military does not necessarily look at what's the situation on ground. So I think how does one align these two? Is there a way? Because the purpose of, let's say, having this dialogue is also so that we understand that there are different perspectives, and probably there's a need to broaden our understanding and locate the military perspective also within, local concerns.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, please, over to you.
Yeah. So a long question, but very short answer. The planning is done. It is always top down, in the sense that at the national level, what does the political leadership want? What is the end state that they want? They will define the end state that is required, based on which the three chiefs of staff, chief of air staff, chief of army staff, and the naval staff will make their plans. Will then talk it down to the CNC level, and then down to the fighting level. So the plans are at the wars are not fought without the political masters giving their go ahead. That is one very clear thing. It cannot be fought. So therefore, it has to start from the political level and come down to the grassroots level planning. However, during the execution of missions, in case, for example, we are going to say we are going to destroy some fields with the tanks advancing through the fields into enemy territory. So on our own side, the administration will be taken into confidence, one. Secondly, there will be evacuation of locals from that area to avoid collateral damage. However, we cannot do anything on the other side. We can't. But the local administration on the other side will also have a basic fair idea about what is happening, and their army counterparts will be in touch with them so as to avoid loss of civilian lives, basically. Property, of course, you really can't do much when in case of large scale conflicts where armies run over territory and kind of destroy everything that is in its path. But the modern day conflict is not like this. It is completely different. It is localized. It is high intensity, and it always is a very small, short, and sharp war that is going to be fought. This is it's my understanding and my reading. Large scale wars are, where hundreds and thousands of square kilometers of area were destroyed. I don't think are going to happen in the near future. Was I okay in the answer, or you want something else also?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it gives us a perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Shivani, just check the chat box.
Ma'am, I have one question. What is the potential effect of planned hydropower facilities in India on water availability in Pakistan?
Who is this for?
Ma'am, Mr. Mukunda.
Mukund is coming.
Mr. Mukunda.
Mukund, can you hear us? Mukund? Mukund, it looks like he can't hear us. Okay, Shivani, I think, okay, let me call him and ask whether he can hear us.
He's saying something now.
Yes, sir.
I couldn't get the question actually.
Sir, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes, now we can. Yes, we can hear you.
I didn't get the question actually.
Can't hear you again. Say hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we
I
can
think
hear you.
he's not been able to understand the question.
I didn't get the question.
Shivani, if you can repeat the question.
So it's in the chat.
Yes, sir.
It's in the chat box also.
Yeah, okay.
Sir, I'll repeat.
Yeah, repeat also.
What is the potential effect of planned hydropower facilities in India on water availability in Pakistan?
So I think that's a question that I think I'm not an expert on that much, but I would like to again emphasize, whatever happen upstreams will have an impact downstream. So definitely, if anything, that is why in our diplomacy initiatives we need to take the interests of both the nation. That's why I've been saying approaches shouldn't be traditional, and diplomacy should be strategic in a manner that we need to take care of the downstream communities as well. Because what will happen to us, what we will do to others will also have that could be done to us by others as well. And if we start having dialogues in silos, then I think the impact would be devastating. So my answer would be in a very crispy manner, very precise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So concluding the session, I would like to thank for our chairperson, Mr. Mukunda, for being with us and giving valuable inputs. I am also grateful to the plenary speaker, Dr. Janki Andharia and Ms. Lavanya for an enriching session. I would also like to thank everyone presenting and every participant today in this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Soumya, do you want to come in and talk about tomorrow?
Yes, ma'am. So just an announcement, tomorrow we'll have one session starting at 2 p.m. where we are looking at technology and the use of technology, followed by our concluding session where we have Major General Bindal from NIDM, Mr. Pankaj Anand from Oxfam for the valedictory session, and we'll also have a 10-minute talk by Mr. Sanjay Srivastava. So I look forward to your participation tomorrow on the last day of the roundtable. Thank you so much.
But we have a we have a series of paper presentations also before that, right?
Yes, yes. We have 4 presentations.
Which will be chaired by Professor Jacqueline Joseph?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so please do come in and
by 2 o'clock, same time.
Yes, in time.
We start at 2 p.m.
I also want to thank all the students who have been working behind the scenes on posters, writing reports, and preparing sort of brief notes to be presented to recap every day. So thank you very much. Special thanks to NIDM for all logistics. I think we have been the most challenging entities for NIDM to manage. Arjit, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Harjit is currently not here, ma'am. So I am I am looking after the hosting.
Thank you, Raju Kamal. Okay, thanks to all the paper presenters and participants.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Soumya, we can leave?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Everyone, thanks.